introduced me. I'm an associate organizer with Greater Cleveland Congregations. My colleague was not introduced. My colleague is Khalilah Worley-Billy.
Hey, Khalilah.
Hello. She is a senior organizer with GCC, has been with us since the beginning, is a lifelong Cleveland resident, and will do the bulk of kind of our later work. So I'm going to get us started, sort of frame this conversation and sort of the ongoing relationship we've had with Lakewood Presbyterian. We're going to go around and introduce ourselves. So Khalilah and I know who's in the room. Talk about why GCC, why we do what we do, and then Khalilah's going to give more information on what we are actually doing. Okay. There's a signage sheet coming around. This will give us a sense to remember, a week from now, who was in the room. If you want us to contact you or you want to be in touch, go ahead and leave a phone or email. Otherwise, a name is fine. It's fine. Okay, so we actually, some of you all might not know this, we actually have had an ongoing relationship with Lakewood Presbyterian. We first had an initial conversation, I don't know what this goes to, in 2015 with your minister. Okay, I think that's fine. In 2015 with your minister, so 8 years ago, Pastor John Lenz, who is the pastor of Forest Hill Presbyterian Church and the president of our board, he also reached out in I think 2018 just to see if we had common interests, if we wanted to do things together, and both times, oh man, those flowers are beautiful. Both times, I think both sides decided, this might not be the best time. In the meantime, we have had another Lakewood congregation join. So Lakewood Congregational, the local UCC church, is one of our more active members on the west side. And so now we're re-engaging and thinking, are there things that we might want to do together? Do we have common interest in justice in Cuyahoga County? And can we build a base of power in Lakewood to really affect how life in Lakewood is done, right? To make a more just Lakewood, a more just Cuyahoga County. You support a lot of vital organizations in local Lakewood and also in Cuyahoga County and outside of Ohio. You do a lot, right? So what makes GCC unique? Okay, I think several things. So what we do is we organize institutions to build power to fight for systemic change, right? So we're looking for leaders who want to change the world here locally in Cuyahoga County. Okay, so what makes us unique is that we're not actually a direct service organization, which I think is the more common, prevalent church service organization, right? So it's very common, it's very easy to think about when you're a church, we want to do good in the world. How do we do that? We find hungry people, we give them food, right? We find a school classroom that needs supplies, we give them the supplies, right? There's a need, immediate, we meet it. We're thinking down the line. What is happening in the system of Cuyahoga County? Where are people being left out? Where is there inequity? And how do we do the long-term relational work to fix that system? Right? So both are needed, both are important. It is important to make sure, my sister's a teacher, it is important to make sure teachers have the supplies they need so that they can serve our kids, right? We're thinking, alongside of that, how do we pass the levy so all our kids have the type and the level of scholarship needed to fund their needs, right? It is important to study the history of racial inequity. We're thinking what tangibly in our community is a manifestation of that, and how do we change that system? We're doing that in a couple different ways that Khalilah is going to talk about shortly, right? So our leaders are looking for ways to create a more just Cuyahoga County, a more just Cleveland, a more just Lakewood. That's the long-term relational organizing that we do. That can be hard to understand, really abstract. Khalilah is going to make it more tangible and easy to understand for us.
Thanks, Nathan. It's really good to be here with you all. Khalilah Worley-Billy, senior organizer with GCC. I'm also, just a huge admirer of the Lakewood community, either because I spent a lot of time in my other hat as the board chair of the Healthy Lakewood Foundation. And so it is, even though I live on the east side, I spent a lot of time in different places, meeting a lot of different people in Lakewood, but also looked at the community assessment, looked at what's going on that impacts the determinants of health, the social determinants of health. And so really great to just be in this space. We actually had a board meeting here just last month. And so really great to be in this space in a different capacity, which is my main hat, the hat that helps shape me, helps strengthens me, and also help to address where I want to see change. So who is GCC? You see on the screen. We want to work with leaders who want to win. Because let's be honest, losing sucks. Right? It's nice to live to fight another day. It's nice to cheer on that you can get there, but when you get there, it's an amazing feeling. It also is a story of how you got there. Most winners don't start off with just winning. There is practice, there's strengthening, there's development, there's shaping, there's tension. Anybody who ever ran or you ever played a sport, you know the tension in your muscles that it takes to get through it. And so we're not saying, oh, leaders want to win. Oh, yes, we all winning. Yeah, no. There is a story behind every win. There's development that needs to happen with every win. There is tension and flexing of the muscles and extending muscle usage that you may have never used before. And so it's mostly about getting people who are willing to do what it takes to challenge themselves and to challenge others to win. All right, there's an interval. Okay. So our argument number one is that we believe everyone in here is here because you want change. And it's an argument. We can go back and forth. I'm okay with a little tension. Totally am. Maybe you're like, I'm just here because Nathan is here, Khalilah Worley-Billy, that's a unique name. I'm just curious. That works too, right? But we believe fundamentally it was some curiosity there because either you want to know what's possible to change, you want to know if maybe you know GCC for a long time. Has GCC changed? What has happened with them? What's been going on? But that's what we believe you're in this room for. The other thing is our argument. We live and operate in two worlds. Please, I know the argument about the earth being flat. No, that's not what I'm talking about. Right? We're talking about different types of worlds. So follow along with me. The world as it is one world. And then there's the world as it should be. Now I want you to focus on the world as it should be. Right now, on a Sunday, the world as it should be is that we are all saints. That was the message today. Frankie, Elizabeth, and Ian. Before they can learn how to do long division, bless their hearts in this educational world today, right? For algebra. But they're saints. Yes?
There's some people that have hearing disabilities.
Oh, so should I project more?
There's a microphone.
Is there a microphone?
Yeah.
Hello, technology. Sorry about that. I did not know. Is that better?
Oh, yeah.
I got an applause for just my voice. So wait, it's gonna get better, I hope. All right. So, right here? Okay, is that even better? So it doesn't trip, okay, got it. Thank you. And do not ever be afraid to interrupt when it is about your self-interest of hearing and being able to participate. I am not offended. I have 10 out of 11 children. I've gone through this every day of my life. Correct me and
Thank you.
okay. So, in the world as it should be, we are taught we are all saints. That's the way the world should be. The main driver in the world as it should be is love. It's agape. Or in our, Jewish community, it's shalom. It is when we understand that each of us, because who our Creator is, was designed with purpose. That's the world as it should be. We are taught to love thy neighbor, treat others as we want to be treated. So it starts with us, how we want to be treated. That is the world as it should be. And in the world as it is, love is in that world too. But the key driver that we have experienced and that we see that shapes this world is power. Now when I say power, that might trigger some people. So when I say power, what do you think the definition of power is? Shout it out like popcorn, be loud so others can hear you. And I can repeat too. Yes?
The ability to assert your wants over those of others.
The ability to assert your wants over the ability of others. Okay? Anybody else? Yes?
Control of resources.
Control of resources. Okay? Anybody else?
Might makes right.
What'd you say?
Might makes right.
Might makes right. Anybody else? Okay? Power, the definition is simply the ability to act. Why is that definition important to us? Especially when it is the driver of the world as it is.
Got the new telephone numbers.
It is the ability to act. You had the first part of it. Our experience with power adds the other words. Might, control, resources. However, the simple definition of power is the ability to act. So the driver for GCC in this world is how do we use our power, which simply means the ability to act when we see in this world it is not rooted in the world as it should be, which is love, agape, shalom. We all have power. It didn't say the ability to act if, or the ability to act or, simply the ability to act. And the way GCC has seen its ability to act is by organizing people and organizing money persistently and consistently to have the ability to act for change. Oftentimes it's because we've experienced power in a very dominant way. Anybody here ever been fired? You don't have to be ashamed, it's okay. All right? Sometimes children might say dominant power because parents have to tell them what to do. Now, that type of dominant power is because you can foresee the future. You know what's ahead if you touch that stove. But many of us don't have that type of parental dominant power all of our lives. We have dominant power that comes from structures or systems that don't even want to hear us. Don't want to see us as equal. Don't want to see us as having the ability to act. Don't want to see certain communities that should have access to the same things they have because they fear it challenges what they should obtain. And so for us, we live in a tension. This is where our muscles are being flexed constantly. Using our power in the world as it is to get closer to the world as it should be. And so when we take on actions like Medicaid expansion for Ohio, helping Cleveland Municipality School District, Metropolitan School District pass levies, decreasing the number of low-level, non-violent crimes from felonies to misdemeanors, That's us living in this tension between the world as it is to get us closer as the world as it should be. But I got news for you too. Like, check me on time too, Nathan. It's not new. We have seen several moments in our history that have used organizing, training, and tools to operate in the world as it is, using their power, the ability to act, to get it closer as the world as it should be. Not all the way over, but get us closer. And one key example of that is the Montgomery bus boycott. Most people see it as a moral fight, as the world as it should be, because we should not have people sit on the back of the bus because of the color of their skin.
We're talking about Rosa Parks.
We are talking about Rosa Parks. Organizing is a tool. What many people don't know about the Montgomery bus boycott was that Rosa Parks wasn't the first. There were two other women who was in the same predicament, but it did not go the same way. So Rosa Parks went to a training, just like many others who participated in sit-ins, and they went through the rigorous torture of what they might encounter if they were approached with bigotry and racism. She was trained, but she wasn't trained individually. It was organizations, congregations that said, if this moment should occur, we have to be organized to use our power to create change. It wasn't just a spur of the moment. This had been happening for decades. So you have to have your leaders trained and organized to be prepared. But they also did an analysis, because the driver in this world is power. So you have to do an analysis to see where you have power. And one of the things they found out was over 50% of the work population were domestic workers who depended on public transportation. 50%. So that means half of the people who took public transportation were domestic workers. And African Americans represented approximately 75% of ridership. When you hear that, 75% ridership, which means if they're not on the bus, it not only impacts the drivers, the way the bus looks, it impacts the money that they bring in. They organized carpools and supported only gas stations that supported the boycott. Because if you just say we're not going to ride the bus and everyone is not with you, that 75% ridership is not impacted. They may be able to survive off of 40% ridership or 50%, but when you organize carpools and say, if you stand with us, we'll make sure you still get to work. Gas stations who supported racism and bigotry also lose money. We are only going to support the gas station, so only get your gas from these particular gas stations that support us. The boycott lasted 381 days. The daily loss of revenue was approximately $3,000 per day. The total loss of approximately $1,143,000. The Montgomery bus boycott didn't happen, it didn't get reversed around letting African Americans ride on the bus because it was the moral right thing to do in the world as it should be. It changed because in the world as it is, the driver is power. They had the ability to act. They had the ability to win because it was the 1,143,000 reasons why they couldn't let it continue. Organized people, organized money, persistently and consistently creates change. So just to wrap up, it's our experience of power that shapes our thinking of it. It's the dominant power, the lies, the force the misinformation, miscommunication that makes us think about power in a way that is not good. Makes us think that power does not deserve to be in any world. But power is simply the ability to act. And understanding that in the world as it is gets us closer to the world as it should be. Everything I'm saying is always an argument. It's part of the debate team at Fisk University. I love having that as a moment of opportunity. So you can challenge it too. And we can have that when we have this open discussion about it. But because power is simply an ability to act, GCC takes that power to action. And that's how we've been able to win on key issues. But we also know in the world as it is, doesn't mean one victory shapes the world. Doesn't mean one victory gets us to the world as it should be. It means we have to be persistent and consistent. And we're currently in a fight around battle for democracy, increasing the voter turnout because we understand voter suppression. But what we're not talking about is voter depression. That people who are registered to vote have lost trust in democracy. Because in the world as it is, when it comes to democracy, power has been used over them to get their vote but not get them to the world as it should be. So they remove themselves. And we're not going to guilt them about it because we drive the streets, we see the change. We're not telling them they're the definition of insanity. What we are saying is, we're going to go door to door and hear your story and shape an issue agenda based on what you want to see change and present those issues to candidates running for an office. We are nonpartisan. We do not endorse or oppose any candidate. But we do want them to know before they take office what are key issues that their constituents want to see change. And we want to see if they'll commit to that. And then we put it in a voter guide. And we give it to low propensity voters, those who are registered to vote. They believe in their right to vote, but they want to see accountability for that vote. We're working on the issue of criminal justice around youth bindovers. Cuyahoga County is the top county in this state that binds over African American males to the adult system. Discretionary bindovers of 14 and 15-year-olds whose life is forever changed. And we do not take away from the fact that the victims who they have harmed or who they have hurt is important. And we also know that a mind is not fully developed until it's 25 years old.
What's a bind
So
over?
how we have to do that? So bind over is when you take a youth who has committed a crime and they are then processed and bounded over to the adult system. Now there are two types, discretionary and mandatory. Mandatory bindovers has to happen due to state law. But discretionary is when a judge gets to decide, based off the prospects of the case, if the youth should be bounded over. And so that is an issue in which, in the world as it is, you have to think about what's happening, particularly for Cuyahoga County to have more than Franklin and Hamilton combined, and particularly binding over African American boys more than anywhere else in the state. How do we, as an organization, utilize our power to get it as a world as it should be? And I'll stop there. All right. Yes.
Curious, do we know what the percentage is of how many of these cases are mandatory versus discretionary?
So we only focus on the discretionary. So we do not know how many they're binding over for the mandatory, because that is something that's going to happen even if the judge wanted to. It is mandatory based on the cases. The discretionary ones are the ones that we are focusing on. And I believe it's somewhere like Cuyahoga County has like 378 or so, whereas Hamilton and Franklin are somewhere like in the 70s or in the 90s. We can get all of the detailed information to you. You will likely be hearing more about this. It is an ongoing dynamic here. We had a large action December of 2022, where we had a presentation at Olivet Institution of Baptist Church around the issue of bindovers. And so I'll be more than happy to share all the detailed information if anyone is interested. But when we talk about racism, and when we talk about economic restraints, these are the type of issues that we didn't just read a book, it came to us. It happened when we were going door to door, and we were talking to residents, honestly, around voting. And one of the key issues that came up was how many of their sons, nephews, neighbors have been bounded over to the adult system. Yes?
I think it might be helpful just to understand the context of GCC.
Yes.
It's, Greater Cleveland
Congregations,
right?
Yes.
So essentially, you are a coalition of faith organizations.
Absolutely.
And you help organize that coalition to create change.
Absolutely. So we are about 38 member institutions. And you do not only have to be congregations, you can be nonprofits. So we have several organizations that are part of us. Neighborhood Family Practice, Centers is also a member. So you don't only have to be congregations. Where we see a genuine connection is if there is an urge for change, or if they're an organization that have a mission around change and faith. I won't say or faith, and faith. Any other questions? Yes.
For the discretionary bindover, is there ever rationale or reason given for a case?
I mean, absolutely. I mean, a judge has to present the rationale and the reason. Our dynamic is looking at the percentage that Cuyahoga County bounds over. When other counties have worked really hard, some of the counties in different states, they just won't bound them over, period, if they're discretionary. Because they say the juvenile system is created to rehabilitate. The adult system is created to correct. And so in some states, they look at it and say, children are constantly worth being rehabilitated. Because once you get into an adult system, it's about correction. Well, if they're still developing, if their brains are still developing, you can't correct what's more difficult to correct, what hasn't been developed. And so it's thinking through, and we're not saying that no youth, shouldn't be bounded over. We're looking at these discretionary ones, and we're posing the question, why is it that this county, in particular, are bounding over more than counties combined, even when the population is less? And so that's the real question. In the world as it is, you have to pose the question and use your power to see if you can prove why it is impacting communities of color, impacting communities of low economic class, impacting communities of different genders, impacting communities in general, that is helping them not get closer to the world as it should be. Yes, Jane.
What part of what process is it if a child is young, or discretionary? What is it? What does that program consist of?
Well, so what happens is that any juvenile that is arrested, they go directly to the juvenile system, and then they go to a trial to see if they will be bounded over as an adult, and then they get sentenced as an adult.
What if they are determined not to be in the adult program, like, they need to be helped, they need to be, they're young yet. What is that program that they have for these young people? What does that consist of?
Once you're bounded over to the adult system. So they are no longer functioned or helped as a juvenile.
That's what I want to know is what happens when they're in the juvenile portion?
Oh, yes.
Yes,
So the juvenile system is created to rehabilitate juveniles. So there's counselors, there's different dynamics inside. Now I will say, even our juvenile system needs support in doing better diversion processes. we definitely will agree with that, right? They need support. However, what we do know is that the adult system does not have in place anything to rehabilitate a juvenile. It is a correctional system of correcting adults, not youth.
Well, are the juveniles, do they remain in their home?
No.
It's a prison.
There's a juvenile, it's called like a detention center. So even if some of the juveniles who are bounded over in youth, they are bounded over. Many of them are not sentenced more than 3 years, which means they could have remained in the juvenile detention center to serve out their sentence instead of being bounded over to be with adults. So these sentences, some of them are shorter time frames. Now there are some that are 15, there's some that are 21 years, but there are many of them that are somewhere between 2 to 5 years. And if you're 14, you got 5 years, you're getting out at 19. You can remain in the juvenile system up to you're 21. So how is it that we're bounding over youth to an adult system when they're not at the age where they were aged out of it? So that's the impact we're concerned about. I want to take another question, Jane, and then I'll come back to you.
So
yes.
just sort of pivoting a little bit, could you share with us some of the instances where you have been able to mobilize for change?
Yeah, so I'll give you an example. So it was about the issue about Medicaid expansion for Ohio. And we also are nonpartisan, which means in the world as it is and should be, we are going to have no permanent enemies, no permanent allies, only permanent interests. Many people thought Governor Kasich would not be interested in working with an organization like GCC because there was an assumption that we were liberal and that we would not have a conversation with him. They were wrong. He wanted to sign a collateral sanction bill at one of our GCC member institutions. And before the signing of that bill, there was a conversation with several of our key leaders around where we had common interests. Expanded Medicaid for Ohio was one of them. Now, we were thrown off because we didn't know that would be the thing that he would mention to us. We also said, well, we can be that leverage. Because as the governor, this is an issue around legislation because you can put it in the bill, you can put it in the budget, but if it's voted down, then you're going to have a back and forth that we as the public won't know about and not be able to use our ability to create change. So what we decided to do was create a coalition, the Northeast Ohio Medicaid Expansion Coalition, that was made up of hospitals, foundations, congregations, all throughout Northeast Ohio, where we coordinated and organized trips to Columbus. We worked with the major key hospitals to put pressure on legislators to get us the meetings, because that was the other thing. You know, you had, at the time, Cleveland Clinic was the #2 employer of the state. It's now the #1. Well, you're going to get a meeting with the legislator if Cleveland Clinic is telling them to meet with these leaders from the Northeast Ohio Medicaid Expansion Coalition. We were getting ready to actually sign petitions to get it on the ballot. But luckily, legislation passed it prior to that happening. A part of it was using our ability to get hundreds, thousands of people, because the Northeast Ohio Medicaid Expansion Coalition replicated to several actual cities in Ohio. Columbus had their version, Cincinnati, Dayton, Toledo. All of the people began to work with their hospitals and foundations and their civic organizations to put pressure on their legislators to make this happen. And that impacted folks wasn't just about race. It was around economic status. I mean, the farmers who came out to talk about what would happen if they were not able, what has been happening without insurance, without health coverage. You know, those individuals who did not have children, who worked privately but could not afford insurance. Those were the conversations, because it was our ability as a multicultural, multi-faith, you know, spread across the county, using that power to have conversations around common interests. Medicaid was one of those. Right here in the blue, and then right here up front, yes.
A lot of the work evidently is advocacy for the GCC. I have two questions, two parts. Who decides what issues to advocate for? If you have a congregation sign up and chooses not to do that advocacy, what happens then? What's the role?
Yes, so we are made up of multiple bodies of power. So the very first and the primary focal point is core teams. So that's each of our member congregations have up to 5 to 20, depending on your size of congregation, people who are willing to be a liaison from what's happening in their community and their congregation to GCC. We also monthly have what's called an Engaged GCC Assembly, where members of different congregations can come, they receive training, they hear updates on what's happening in the neighborhoods or with GCC, and then they begin to build relationships with each other around some of the key issue areas that they're working on, to a point where if it's multiple congregations working on this issue, it becomes a conversation around, should we be looking at this as an organizational approach and where we should create change? That is then lifted up to our body of power, which you all would think of as a board. We call it a strategy team. So the strategy team is responsible for thinking of, if we did take action on this, what will be the strategy? What's the politics? What's the internal dynamics we have to consider before going public with this issue? So you have the core team, Engaged GCC. You also have delegates, which is the voting body of each congregation. So 2 that we ask to represent the congregation. 1 vote, and then we vote on if we're going to ratify what the strategy team recommends for us to go public around an action, and then we determine how many people need to be a part of that, and those delegates help to what we call, we do this often, where we take a poll and we say, how many people do you think you can bring to this issue, or how many people do you think can participate in this, whether it's collecting signatures or turning out to an action. And if you've anybody here ever been to a GCC action? Okay. Prior to COVID, so like the first picture I showed, it was it could be anywhere from 1,000 to 1,500 people. Because those delegates do the work, and inside their member institution, they'll say, we'll bring 100, we'll bring 50. And then we publicly take accountability for our numbers. So at every action, we ask them, how many did you commit? How many are here tonight? Publicly, in front of leaders, in front of candidates, in front of decision makers, to show that we're willing to be vulnerable about our accountability, because we want them to be accountable and vulnerable to us as well. Are you going to create the change? What's your timeline? How much money would this cost? So if we can display that public accountability, we want them to as well. Yes?
So my question was, if a church or congregation becomes a member of GCC, what are the opportunities for the individual congregants to participate, besides just like financial support?
Absolutely. And it is financial support because we're a dues-based organization. So every member who participates in GCC pays dues. That helps us be autonomous. We don't take any government money. We do get support from foundations and grants, but we don't want that to be beholden on us, because if you have to worry about if taking action on an issue is going to impact the grant you're going to receive or impact money you're going to receive, then oftentimes organizations don't do it. So getting dues from our organizations help to support us to be able to act on issues that may appear to other foundations or government associations as like, you shouldn't be doing that. Well, our members say we should do it. They pay dues. So we're going to do it because we can't be beholden to just grants or government funding. So we are a financial-based organization. How can members be involved? There are oftentimes at these Engaged GCC assemblies, when you come, you do what's called a relational meeting. At every Engaged GCC meeting, you do a relational meeting, a one-on-one with someone you don't know. And you can build relationships that way. You can strictly join GCC just to be curious about other people. That's one way. The other way is when we share what we're doing. So for instance, at the last Engaged GCC assembly, we realized a couple of our congregations, maybe 3, are doing ESL courses for Ukrainian immigrants who are here. Lakewood is one of them. B'nai Assurin is another. So the two leaders was like, well, we should talk and share information and build your relationships that way. And they might do their own thing. The same thing happened with Anshe Hess at Fairmont Temple to address anti-Semitism, and they connected with several key leader GCC institutions. It's not a GCC issue at this time because they wanted to take ownership around building the relationships for themselves. And just, I think it was last weekend, on the news, you saw this multi-faith, organization presented around hate in this country, in this world at this moment. And several of GCC key leaders who built their relationships went forward with that. It's not a GCC issue. It's something they're personally interested in. And then the other way is, because of the relationships, because of what's rising up from conversations in neighborhoods, congregations inside of our congregations, GCC takes on those issues and we fight together. And that is the other way that you as an individual or the congregation can get involved. You also get access to training. So part of your dues pay for training, organizing training, teaching you organizing tools that you can use for individual issues that are impacting your congregation or your community. You get access to the organizers, and so when you become a member, an organizer is assigned to work with you. You also get support from the Engaged GCC chairs, who will tell you, like, here's the meetings, here's some people you should talk to. There's also some resources there as well. Respectful of time, I'm going to take part, and then Jane, I will close with you.
Just one thing I wanted to add, Khalilah. I was at a GCC clergy breakfast last week, and so a number of the different people within GCC different working groups were standing up and saying, this is what we're working on. So I just want to make it clear, it's not only one thing
That's very
that
true.
GCC
Yes.
is doing, but there were easily half a dozen different groups. One of them was a bind-over, one was a bail issue, one was a health equity, one was voter suppression, depression. So I think, Cheryl, to kind of answer your question, chances are good within the work that is happening within GCC that you'll find kind of your passion area.
Thank you. Another one is we have a purchasing co-op that we are part of called Power Up to help congregations and organizations with their utility bills, copier, printers, because we saw predatory practices with some of our institutions around increasing the rate of things like waste hauling and utilities and gas, especially during the pandemic. And our congregation was like, we need to do something about this because some of us have full-time people who are able to negotiate contracts. Some of us have volunteers who do this work and they're being duped, they're being taken advantage of. Contracts are changing midway. So we created a purchasing co-op so that when all of our congregations submit their bills, it gets a lower competitive price. We also recently are working together, which is called Relieving Medical Debt. And we're working with the organization RIP Medical Debt, where our congregations are raising money collectively, where we believe about $40,000 will eliminate $6 million of medical debt for residents of Cuyahoga County. And that program is spreading throughout, but there's something about when the faith institutions take that first step to relieve medical debt for residents that may or may not be in their seats and their pews and their sanctuaries. So we're doing that as well. So there's several things, thank you, that's impacted that. Jane, and then we'll close out with you, yes.
I was going to say, there might be some people who would have some education experience, like teachers, and that's what I was thinking of when you were talking about young people being put into this one section. And I know it's a prison kind of a thing, but if there could be, efforts or volunteers who'd be willing to go in and maybe help the students who didn't know how to read or had trouble with the math or needed to be able to learn how to take tests or just anything kind of like that would add to the skill level.
Absolutely.
So that they can participate and then maybe would be able to work themselves out of where they are.
Absolutely. So we also have several congregations. I'm sure like many of you have built relationships with schools, So for instance, the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Cleveland, they partner with Franklin D. Roosevelt School to help them with their issue around truancy and absenteeism, but they also do tutoring and a food program. So it's both ends of the spectrum. How do you address the need and the challenge? And so doing that work, and then we also have, Affinity Baptist Church that's working with Miles Elementary and John F. Kennedy High School. So as congregations, many of you are doing this, but what they do is say, hey, we need more GCC congregation support. Can you send some volunteers with us to uplift that? So you're absolutely right. And as a former educator of Holy Family School in Chicago, that's always my drive. Like, what are we both teaching and challenging?
I was thinking,
Yep.
for the ones who are actually in the prison, I mean, I understand what you're talking about, and I applaud that. That's great. But I'm thinking about going into, whether maybe the prisons don't allow that.
Yeah. So the other thing is, remember, GCC is not a direct service organization. Our members are. So if that's something that Lakewood Presbyterian is interested in doing as a congregation, great. But we're looking at the systemic dynamic of why so many are in there in the first place. So that's the way we do both and. It's not an either or. We're not saying, well, you go off and do that. It's what are you hearing inside of that facility that you're lifting up to GCC to take a systemic approach on how we can organize to create change. Last one.
So I know, I assume Forest Hill is a participating congregation.
Absolutely, yes.
Fairmount, et cetera. And then on the west side here, there's Lakewood Congregational Church, right? What other west side institutions are members of GCC?
Yes, so we have not many. We have a larger western suburb representation, and we only have one, which is Bethel, West Temple, Cleveland West Side. One of our challenges is the West Side, and Nathan is doing an incredible amount of work to build relationships with, broaden our base on the West Side, but we do have like Divinity in Parma Heights, Middleburg Heights. We have, what am I missing?
Can I actually answer?
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah.
Use the mic.
Because we have a couple other Presbyterians.
Yes,
who
we
are
do.
interested, Nathan might mention.
So we actually have 3 in the city of Cleveland now, right? So we have St. Luke's Episcopal, one of our federally qualified health clinics, Neighborhood Family Practice, has a number of sites on the west side, they're members. We have Dover UCC, along with Lakewood Congregational, another UCC, Middleburg Heights, 2 Unitarian churches, Southwest and West Shore, 1 Lutheran church, Divinity, and I believe that's it. It comes about right at around 10, and then of course we're talking to more folks.
Yeah, I'm just saying, because part of the power of this is the ability to collaborate.
Yes,
And so I'm just looking for ways that then we could plug in and collaborate with the other institutions that are a part of it.
That's really on the ground floor, right? So some of the work I'm doing is building relationships between folks on the west side. That hasn't been done before, but it's being done now. So I mean, if you want to be a part of that coalition, like now is the time. We'd love to have you.
Yeah, we're also exploring a west side gathering of our different member institutions in December. And so we will make sure to get that information if you want to send a representative or be a part of that. Because we also understand that like west side dynamics is like different suburbs. But we're also seeing some really similarities around issues. Where oftentimes people make the assumption like we want to focus on the big picture things like racism and classism and all the isms, but then sometimes I want to do that, but my basement keeps flooding, and what is going on with these sewers and these pipes? And that was something we discovered having a conversation at Divinity, and guess what? That's just as important. Because you are not able to fight all the isms if you got to put your children's play set on the line because the sewer destroyed it, or furniture, or your insurance premiums are going up because you have to report damages each and every time. The isms are horrible, don't get me wrong. But also not being able to have a full summer. Also being frustrated around your homes, being impacted by older, antiquated pipes there, right? We can do both. We can fight the isms, and we can make sure that we too have the ability to act. Because power is not just based off of the, I know we talk about this, right? It's about the least of these. But if we're also experiencing moments where we can't fully fight for the least of these, we got to shape what needs to happen to do both. I don't want to have an issue over who got it worst. I want to have the conversation as why any of us have it worse at all. And that's what we can do collectively together. So a lot of head nodding about the flooding, so we should probably have that conversation with you all too. We're taking a local action, and that happened going door to door talking about voting. We asked, what's one thing if you were on the ballot you would change? And flooding was the #1 issue. And we was like, hold on, wait a minute. They're not talking about what's happening on the ballot now. They're talking about, in order for me to even get to the polls, and think about this, we gotta address what's happening with our sewers. And we had our first community meeting, we're gonna have another one in the Parma Heights neighborhood. Then we heard, well, what about Berea? What about North Olmsted? What about Brook Park? That's gonna be also part of the conversations. No permanent enemies, no permanent allies, but we also will always have permanent interests in how we can do that together. And I'm done. Thanks, everybody.
So thank you for everybody who gave us your information. If you did, I will reach out to you just to see how this hit you, if you have any other questions or actions you want to do. This was organized in part through Terry and Laura's good efforts. So if you are, yeah, absolutely, there's a round of applause. Yeah. If you're thinking, hey, this is interesting, I might want to do something here in Lakewood, talk to Terry and Laura, and we can see if we can get something started.
And the last thing I'll say, if you're interested in the buying over work, you'll be pleased to know the co-chair of that team is Reverend Ryan Wallace of the Fairmount Presbyterian Church. So it is a Presbyterian dynamic that is leading this base. So if you see Reverend Wallace, you know anybody at Fairmount Presbyterian, you can reach out to them. And that's part of the excitement. Pastor John Lentz is the board chair and has been during a pandemic, during what's happening now with this epidemic. So the Presbyterians are leading.
Yes.
And if you want to be a part of that to help shape us for the future, not just get on the train, but figure out a way to drive it, we know that it can happen because it's happening with your Presbyterians now.
Thank you so much.